Hello, Lotus audiences. My name is Darius Davies, aka the Mad Lad, a Jihad, the Persian Nightmare, man from Tehran, Ayatollah of rock and roller, comedian, and host of the Three Speech podcast, alongside someone you might know, Mr. Leo Curse. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. Well, I thought you'd be the perfect person to discuss some of these inflammatory topics with, because we're definitely going to end our careers today. London currently is experiencing about 35-hour waits, 4-mile-long queue, and millions of people coming to see the Queen laid in state before her funeral on Monday, which hopefully John and I will be going down to talk to people and film, which would be really nice to get the historical account on camera. But it doesn't seem our enemies around the world are too keen about this. Obviously, Carl and Callum have been covering some of the outrage at home and abroad, but it's escalated to the point of where foreign states, including the Iran state media, are making some rather unfavourable comparisons to our late monarch. It seems that many who fail to understand the integral role of the monarchy to our history, whether or not you like who's sitting on the throne, historically and culturally, its relevance in our self-conception of our bonds of British identity, are arguing why we should dispense with it. So let's look at the outrage of all the people around the world and how they don't quite understand us, shall we? Speaking of people that don't quite understand us, the Republican debate was had fairly a while ago by Carl and Josh, so you can subscribe to the website to watch Carl put Josh through the ringer and slowly coach him out of his democracy is everything mindset and maybe towards the, well, you know, the institution has some relevance in our past. I don't know where you stand on where you think the relevance of the monarchy is today.
You know what? So my thinking on the monarchy's evolved. When I was young, I was quite anti-monarchy, and I was actually really surprised at how sad I was when the Queen died, because I'm like, in general, I'm not sure of it. But a few years ago, I was chatting to a friend of mine. He said, the thing is, you get rid of the Queen, all that will happen is you're going to have Boris Johnson as president. And then when you think of it, so I think I would like, because I like the tradition. I like having the Queen on the money. I like having, the Buckingham Palace. I like that sense of tradition. I think that's what makes Britain great. I think, though, we should keep the monarchy. We shouldn't fund them. They should be privatized. They're rich. Privatize the monarchy. They got their own money. They can do their own thing. We give them the palaces, whatever they need, but then we don't need to be sending them that money. Then half the people who are complaining, we're paying £9 million, which actually isn't much for the Queen's funeral.
Yeah, it's 23 minutes of NHS operation time. So
yeah,
it's a drop in the ocean.
It's nothing. It's going to go down in history for the rest of the annals of time. But it will just take away that argument. You know what I mean? It would take, we're spending all this money on these people. Because I understand I agree with the arguments, like, why does that one family get to be forever and ever, amen, the people who rule over us? So I get that, but I also think, there's a certain level of traditionalism. And actually, I think it really showed people's true colours when the Queen died, and you just saw people on the same day just like making just rubbish jokes, not even funny. It's like, give it a rest. Give it a rest.
We'll go through some of those, and I look forward to you eviscerating a couple of them as an established comedian yourself. But let's go to something that definitely wasn't a joke. The Iranian state TV called the Queen one of the worst criminals in the history of mankind and compared her to Adolf Hitler, which doesn't seem all that proportionate, I would say. So the Iranian state-funded TV program said that, from a certain perspective, we should be sad this person died because she died without standing trial, without being punished, and without paying for her crimes. I don't know quite what crimes they're referring to there. As an Iranian, could you possibly enlighten us?
Well, I think the Iranians don't see much difference between the Queen and British Petroleum, who overthrew Mossadegh in 1952.
Right.
So they just see it as one and the same. But also, listen, the Iranians, if they think the Queen's a baddie, they're going to have a rude awakening when they look at the Ayatollahs.
Yeah.
So, but this actually doesn't offend me. And when I saw like Argentinians doing all of it, it didn't offend me because, they don't like us.
Yeah.
What offended me, though, was when I saw it in our own country, from our own people. It's like, you can feel the pain. This is a different thing. The Queen's been alive everyone's entire life. If you've born in this country, you've lived in this, she's been there, she's like an anchor for the country. And you just see these people, it's like, Iranians, they're far away. To them, it means nothing. She's just it's like if I told you, I don't know, some Iranian Rafsanjani died, it mean nothing to you, right? I mean, so you don't feel that thing. So that's, for them, it's just like a funny little off the cuff thing. But it's offensive when it comes from one within our country or two from America, our supposed allies. You see the Onion posting like, and you're like, the Onion, man, have some respect for yourselves. So one, it's not even funny, but have some respect for yourself. Like Babylon B, that Carnegie Mellon
professor.
She
said, I wish her a painful death, which is just disgusting.
And she was probably still alive or dying. It's just like, man, that's just like, it just shows the actual divisiveness and spite. Like I said, I'm not like the hugest, biggest supporter of the Queen, but I can see for everyone else, like, have some sympathy, whether you like or whatever, for the people who do like it. Just now's not the time.
Yeah, your critiques of the institution does not equate to wishing sort of venomous agony on someone.
Yeah.
Especially if the crimes you're charging them with don't quite add up. I don't prescribe to the Iranians' perception of us, particularly because they're pretty much a failed state and lots of them are Islamists. And I'm not going to take moral lessons from the people that have a really high transgender population only because they're so intolerant of gays that they'll go either off the roof or to the clinic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's good solution. No gays in Iran. That's actually true.
Yeah.
So when they said that, that's what happens. But but funny enough, that's what I was reading today. There's the LGB Alliance is in court with the mermaids. One of the mermaid supporters is like, Iran's great. They've got the biggest trans, and they use that as an argument against that. So I think Iran has the largest trans population, but because of that, they're like, are you gay? You want to die? Oh no, you must be a woman. I am a woman. And
It's like when Jordan Peterson once said, there's a crazy alliance between the feminists and the radical Islamists, and he believes it's because the patriarchy that they rally against no longer exists and arguably never did, but they've chased masculinity out of the West, and so they're importing this radical toxic masculinity at the same time as people buying 50 Shades of Grey in droves. It's speaking something to the unconscious there. And so this Munchausen by proxy, which a lot of mothers are inflicting on their children with the trans debate, they're almost looking at Iran and going, oh, because it's done on a statewide scale, this somewhat validates what I'm doing. It's not some sort of pathology I've developed. It's progressive. So if you're looking to Iran to be progressive, my stomach's going to churn a little bit.
We're pretty progressive.
In an English language broadcast and government network Press TV, the host added, "The Queen is a famous imperialist, colonialist, war criminal. Aggression of the British Army throughout the world is done under her name. So we have just a handful of people who have engaged in so many atrocities in the last century. Hitler, for example. Some American presidents belong to that list. And Queen Elizabeth that oversaw the end of the British Empire." Hold on. Sorry. She's responsible for imperial colonial destruction when she oversaw the decommissioning of the empire? I mean, his own words don't add up there, but also the fact that we'll have Douglas Murray talking later. There's one potential thing you could call a genocide transcribed to the British Empire, and the only reason we know about that is because it was so atypical it went down in recorded history, and the actual officers were dismissed from their posts. Whereas for many other societies, that would just be, like, take the Aztecs, for example, doing their child sacrifice, that would just be another day at work.
Where is that? The Boer War, is that?
I can't remember the title of it, but it's covered in our Douglas Murray book club on the War in the West, which Callum and Harry spoke about. So he said, the number of people that have been killed are in the millions, and the Queen is responsible for that. Justice was not delivered to one of the most vicious individuals of that last century. I mean, other than possibly Princess Diana, show me a person the Queen killed. It's a joke. Don't do me. So Iran's foreign ministry has actually not commented on her death either, despite even like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping sending their condolences.
Oh, really?
So they are taking the hard-line anti-British opinion. So meanwhile, in actual Germany, with the German press calling for abolishing the monarchy, for those who are listening in, the House of Windsor has seen many reluctant royals, and King Charles III certainly fits that mould. Now is a good time to abolish the monarchy and bring a better democracy to the UK. I thought they would have been in favour of the House of Windsor, actually, because obviously it was a House of Mountbatten, so they would have felt some kinship. But from the actual article itself, we haven't got it here, but I just thought I'd put a quote. "If any of Charles's behaviour over the past 35 years could be taken as evidence, I'd suggest the last thing he wants to be is king, so Charles could abdicate and leave the spoils to William and Kate. A better outcome, however, would just be shutting the entire shop." So, again, why should we be listening to the Germans? Don't particularly understand us? I'm not feeling particularly any kinship with their arguments. They seem to be just taking, a lot of the Republicans have done this as well, that the idea of democracy is a total good. But as you said in the preface, okay, democracy ends up with politicians like Boris Johnson who campaign on being a libertarian and then throw us under house arrest, so they can just go back on their promises. I'd rather a relatively politically toothless monarchy, but one that's funded as a figurehead of our country and stands as as a sort of global flashpoint, a person that even our enemies celebrate the deaths of, because it's almost like they couldn't believe she could actually die. It's almost like a crack in the armour, but it's like, okay, I'll take the tears of the losers rather than scrapping our time-worn traditions.
Yeah, I think, listen, I think I like the monarchy. I like the idea of the monarchy. I just don't think we should fund it. I think they're rich enough they should be self-sufficient now.
Well, they mostly are, because a lot of the tourism they bring in and the royal estates actually recycle
so that should be their money, but we shouldn't give them a budget. And I think if you have that, then where's your complaint? You can't have a complaint then, because it's like they're doing their own thing. You know, what are you upset about? And then I get that. Although I have to say, DW News did choose a good picture for that. It does look like...
My reservations about Charles's reign aside, the pomp and circumstance, again, we do it better than any other country in the world. It's fantastic. Another enemy as well. So the Qatar state media has decided to say the UK is projected to spend an estimated $9 million on Queen Elizabeth's funeral. Again, drop in the ocean. Amid warnings, the country is heading towards recession and skyrocketing costs of living. Over 2 million people in the UK cannot afford to eat every day, surveys show, and it's a thread. But a reminder, Qatar we're one of the leading oil exporters. They'd love further destabilisation of our energy grid so we could keep buying from them. And if you'd like to talk about human rights abuses and not paying people properly, Qatar, do we want to talk about the amount of people that buried beneath your World Cup stadium by any chance? All the slave labour, the skulls that have lined it like some kind of Soviet canal?
They've got royal family, Qatar, right? That's all Dubai, Saudi Arabia, all...
Yeah.
So it's just like... And I'm telling you, as far as I know, at least the Queen's never had a journalist decapitated via Zoom call or in Turkey, right?
Yeah, she was at least had the dignity to be there and do it in person. She
wasn't exactly.
Going to do it down Skype.
Or arrange a car to pick them up.
Yeah, as you said, with being frustrated about our homegrown stupidity in Secessionists, we've actually imported this to the US as well, unfortunately. So I don't know if you've watched an episode of Succession.
I haven't.
Neither have I, haven't bothered. Its creator, Jesse Armstrong, who actually wrote The Thick of It, Peep Show, as well. He recently won an Emmy for Best Drama Series. And in his speech, he decided to say, it's a big week for Succession. New king in the UK this week. Evidently a little more voting involved in our winning than Prince Charles. Okay, thanks for the virtue signal, I guess. There's Brian Cox, who's an English actor, he was on stage as well, decided to try and save it by going... Keep it royalist, keep it royalist. And after the crowd were laughing, because obviously it was a gaggle of Americans, he said, I'm not saying that we're more legitimate in our position than he is. We'll leave that to the people that we're incredibly grateful to have this. It's a wonderful honour. This group of extraordinary. It's a team effort. So then we look at what the reason that inspires secession, and we see the same sort of tired old platitude talking points of democracy is paramount, and also everything I disagree with is entirely corrupt. So in 2020, Armstrong sent unthank you messages to Trump, Boris Johnson, and COVID itself after winning the Outstanding Drama Series again, and said, the US and UK leaders have a crummy and uncoordinated handling of COVID-19, and said all the nationalists and the quasi-nationalist governments around the world have basically let their people die during this period. The plot of the series focused on the Murdoch family originally, but in 2015 it shifted to a fictionalized version of the Trump campaign. Of course it did. The first script reading for Succession was on Election Day in 2016. They planned to go back to their producer Adam McKay's apartment for a Hillary Clinton victory party, but as Trump's victory became clear, they started drinking whiskey from the bottle. Which is a nice little image. But again, why should I listen to the people who are saying, democracy now, we must elect people, they're much more legitimate, and then want to go with Hillary Clinton?
Oh, man, or anytime I read, like, you know, woke people or left people, if, for example, say just out of something, Prince Charles went, I'm not going to become king, and neither is William, it's going to be Meghan and Harry.
Yeah.
Do you know how much... They'd be like, oh, this is the most greatest thing in the world. Oh, we look at this progressive and all this. It's because they haven't got their way. They don't like what's happening, but they've got no like nuance of like, you know, you can disagree with something, but you can also recognize its the benefits and stuff. And they refuse to do that. And the fact that even today, you know, they're still banging on about Trump.
Yeah.
It's like without Trump, they have nothing. They've lost their mind over Donald Trump. And if you take his name away from it and you look at objectively his record as a president, but you don't know, you just blind look at it, he was a good president.
Very.
Money was up, inflation was down, not like now where the gas prices are $7, whatever they are. He wasn't starting any new wars.
Energy independent.
He was a good, like, I'm Iranian. I've got no reason to like the guy, right? Like, my background's Iranian, right? But he was objectively a good president. But they just refuse to acknowledge that. They refuse to acknowledge, like, man, you're so progressive. Oh, we love women's rights. Why you pulled out of Afghanistan for just left all the women there to be? What do you think's happened to them now? You think they're nice and free, and you don't care. You only care about your own what's good for you, and you lecture from this kind of position of privilege, and you talk down to people. People are sick and tired of it. There's gonna be a backlash in the US in the midterms, and there's already one happened in Sweden yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So it's coming.
It's not from a position of principle. They're just mad that the institution isn't ideologically captured yet. And Charles is very left-wing. He's very on board with the net zero agenda, as we covered yesterday in a particularly contentious segment. It's just this is the sort of death rattle of saying, like, oh, I'm not getting my way yet, and so we're just going to rally against you until you bend the knee to us. And sorry, I'm not gonna listen to appeals to democracy or legitimacy from the kind of people that wanted to elect a sociopath that said about Gaddafi, he came, he saw, he died, and then plunged the entire country into being a massive open-air slave auction. Not exactly lovely. Then let's check on the rest of America's ignorant leftists, shall we? As we previously mentioned, Douglas Murray, he went on an interview of Sky News Australia talking about the New York Times and CNN, who were positively gleeful at the fall of the colonial queen. So let's take a listen to these clips.
This week, I think the paper hit what is just a new low even for it. Within hours of the news of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the newspaper decided to immediately run an incredibly hostile piece by a left-wing non-entity academic talking about colonialism, empire, and the crimes of colonialism, and that Elizabeth II had much to answer for, and this sort of thing. They didn't even leave it 24 hours before doing this. And we've seen in the days since other left-wing media join in. CNN, MSNBC, they've all decided to display not just animus against the Crown and against Great Britain and the Commonwealth, they've also decided to display their extraordinary ignorance of history. I mean, they seem to believe that, for instance, Elizabeth II oversaw the empire. They seem to believe the British royal family made its wealth from colonialism. They seem to think that the colonial era was so terrible that the Commonwealth countries must have been strong-armed into joining the Commonwealth. They've totally ignored the fact, of course, that every Commonwealth country's leadership, quite understandably, has been expressing their mourning and grief for the loss of Elizabeth II. And why would that be if she was such a tyrannical ruler? Only because that's in the head of these very twisted, spiteful, hateful people like the New York Times. It's quite amazing to watch and very disturbing, because it's a reminder, if I can say so, that, you know, institutions like the New York Times used to be great institutions, and they've been destroyed by hatred. And that's the exact opposite of what Queen Elizabeth showed in her own lifetime, which is that you build institutions with love and loyalty. And that's something that the CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, they wouldn't understand the language we were speaking in there.
So I'd question Murray's characterization of the New York Times being a great institution, just because Harry covered a book a little while ago called The Grey Lady Winks, and it goes through how they basically covered up Holodomor, you know, the USSR. Yeah, they ran interference. It's like Time magazine making Hitler, you know, Person of the Year. It's all of these. Have you never seen that cover? It's wild. Look it up. So all of these institutions have often gotten things very wrong and backed the wrong horse historically. But now they're coming out and, having had that record, coming out and saying, oh, the Queen, who saw a massive decommissioning of the empire, which in many respects didn't go the right way. I mean, we see Hong Kong being subsumed by China, we see Barbados joining the Belt and Road Initiative. It's not great to break away from British association. They're saying she's one of the most genocidal figures who's ever lived, and it just doesn't quite add up. It's not exactly journalistic integrity. I
mean, yeah, the whole thing is they're being disingenuous as well. It's because it's like the Queen, in reality, had little power. It's not it's the Prime Minister and the politicians of the day who make those kind of decisions, and the Queen's just like, I'm like you said, she's a figurehead. She's more for us and someone to look up to than someone who's like, oh, we're gonna do this, this, and this. And yeah, Douglas was like, yeah, the Commonwealth all expressed their mourning, but countries are still wanting to join the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So what is it? Namibia? Didn't they like recently joined? Or they were one of the newer countries to join. I think. Double fact check that. Definitely could be wrong, but I think I'm right. So I mean, like, if it's so awful to be part of the why would countries ask to join the Commonwealth?
Why would Jair Bolsonaro have a massive outpouring of love in his statement to the Queen, despite Brazil never having associated with it, if he didn't have some reverence for her as a sort of international grandmother in many respects, and also Britain as a force for good in the world?
You know what it is? It's, I think, 99% of 99% of people in the whole world, most countries, like, all respected and admired the Queen. There's 1% who are online, who have a platform, and unfortunately, all the online discourse has to go through this kind of 1% who get to kind of control the narrative. And you could see, well, in fact, you can visually see. But go look at the queue tracker, a 35-hour queue. It goes down all the way to Tower Bridge, right? That's the reality, not a pink-haired, non-binary. F the monarchy, abolish this or that. The reality is there's a 35-hour queue and it's going to last for days.
Yeah, the socialists are just wrong about the British working class having no ties to its patriotic identity. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. The working class definitely love the Queen. They super love the Queen.
The Americans, though, remain ignorant of this. So Douglas was then subjected to watching this clip from CNN.
You know, this idea of how the royal family, how this family grapples with its history and legacy of colonialism, of slavery, of the potential paying of reparations is a really important one. And I think that King Charles understands that his job is, yes, as a monarch, but he is also an anchor for this Commonwealth.
She said, a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating.
It was a thieving, raping, genocidal
but I think
empire.
I'm lost for words. Step in.
First of all, if the British Empire had been genocidal, the people in question wouldn't be alive. They wouldn't be speaking. If the British Empire had been a genocidal empire, it would have tried to kill all of the people under its rule. It did no such thing. There wouldn't be any people in the countries that were under British rule if the British Empire had been genocidal. Genocidal is the intent to wipe out an entire people. The British Empire never tried to do that anywhere. That's the first thing. The second thing is that absolute moron we just saw first from CNN talking about reparations. She has no idea in her own racist hatred that Britain paid reparations 250 years ago. We paid reparations throughout the 19th century. We paid reparations for slavery by abolishing it under George III and then policing the high seas to ensure that slavery not only was outlawed across the British territories, but was outlawed across the high seas. We paid higher goods in Britain throughout the 19th century, higher prices in goods, because we wouldn't deal in enslaving countries such as the United States of America. And so when people talk about reparations today, it demonstrates not just their own basically give me cash mentality, which is all that you see here, but also the incredible ignorance. They don't know that Britain paid down any moral and financial debt it ever had 200 years ago under very distant predecessors of Queen Elizabeth II. And these people are not just tin-rattling money makers. They're also just constantly showing their unbelievable ignorance of everything that happened before the day they were born.
It's just also very frustrating, the idea that reparations were never paid when we're technically still paying them. So in 2010, there were headlines about how we'd finally paid off the debt to police the high seas to stop slavery. But it turns out we paid that off through borrowing. So technically we're still paying it back because we haven't even paid off the borrowing that we used to pay off the...
Oh, wow.
So we're still paying it in the UK now. You can't even claim reparations, please, especially because lots of Nigerian commentators say, oh, we've had it absolutely... Our country was destroyed by resulting civil wars and slavery. Have you heard of a guy called King Gezo of Benin?
I have not heard of a guy called King Gezo of Benin.
So in Benin, he was the king of the region, and the British Empire rocked up on his shores and said to him, okay, you've got to end the slave trade. And when they were walking to his kingdom, along the sides of the road were slaves and also disemboweled men, women and children. Lovely, very civilized. And they said to him, stop. And he said, actually, slave trade has been the ruling principle of my people. It is the source of their glory and wealth. Their songs celebrate their victories, and the mother lulls the child to sleep with the notes of the triumph over an enemy reduced to slavery. And so he wouldn't stop slavery and child sacrifice when the British asked him to. So the idea that we owe Nigeria reparations, when some of the most successful venerated kings, one of the statues they have is of a woman who is actually a slave trader.
I mean, what people, they refuse to acknowledge that, first of all, there's slavery still going on today.
Yep.
In the Uyghur Muslims, in Libya, it's literal open, like you say, that's not conducive to their narrative, right? Because that's Africans in Libya taking advantage of other Africans in different. It's only the narrative only works when it's white people who've done it. There was slavery before the Roman Empire, the Iranian Empire. You think the British Empire was the first one? No. What I would say is that it's a little bit of a failure of the UK education system that it's not taught that they paid the reparations, that it's not made known that, we're still paying it to this day. And I think we were still paying, like there's a lot of things like that no one knows. Like, we were still paying the US back for, the world wars, up until, a couple years ago.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, we're special relationship. Well, why are you still taking money from us?
Yeah, for the Marshall Plan, exactly. Yeah, well, it's because of a massive historical narrative of self-flagellation. It's an overcorrection for Britain's imperial successes throughout history by the leftists who hate this country. And it's as George Orwell once said, you'll find most socialists would sooner steal from a poor box than sing God Save the King. And that seems to be coming to fruition as people wait in line for the Queen's funeral. So, another terrible news host, I'm sorry to put you through this, but MSNBC are whining about the horrors of colonialism and actually encountered some pushback from a British historian.
And joining our conversation now is Dr. Andrew Roberts. He's an MSNBC British historian, the author of many books about the royal family, including The Royal House of Windsor and George III, The Life and Reign of Britain's most misunderstood monarch. Andrew, good to see you. Thank you for being with us this morning or this afternoon in London. Let's discuss this. The idea that there were people, we just had an historian say that there are many people who are queenists. They're not monarchists. They liked her. They're either bored with the institution or think that it needs to change, or aren't going to be that into the next king. Give us your evaluation of that.
I think that's wildly overstated, frankly. I think when you look at all the opinion polls, we're about 80 to 85% in favour of having a constitutional monarchy, whoever's on the throne. So I think this is extremely overdone, frankly. Rather, I'm afraid to say, as your introduction was, if we had given so much pain to people throughout history, why was Charles chosen by every single Commonwealth country, many of which are former imperial countries, as the head of the Commonwealth? We abolished slavery.
Hold on a second. Andrew, are you really denying what I just said about British colonialism? Are you really doing that, Andrew? Are you really doing that?
We abolished slavery.
Andrew, this is not a propaganda show. Andrew, I need you to stop. I need you to stop for a second. I need you to stop for a second. Are you really taking issue with the horrors of colonialism, Andrew?
I'm certainly taking issue with your remarks about slavery, which we abolished 32 years before you did, and we didn't have to kill 600,000 people in a civil war over it.
Yeah, so that little bespectacled testicle wasn't too delighted that the fact that the British did it without much bloodshed, didn't we?
He looks like Penfold from Danger
You're
Mouse.
spot on with that, actually. Wow.
I'm not gonna...
Go and look that up for anyone who's too Zoomer to know that reference, but that is dead on. Wow. As you prefaced, there was also cringe from The Onion.
Yeah, this was literally hours on the day.
It's not that they can't do satire; it's just that it wasn't that funny.
It's not even funny anything.
No.
I mean, it's not funny. I saw a few funny things about the Queen, but this was not funny at all.
Yeah, for audio listeners, their headline is "Deceased Queen Elizabeth continues to wave at subjects as maggots writhe inside the corpse." Okay. Again, it's just not... It's edgy for the sake of being edgy. I'm not going to say they can't do it.
Here's the thing, though, right?
Yeah.
All of this edginess, this is like... What you're seeing now is you're seeing, safe edgy.
Yeah.
This edgy is... Oh, look how edgy we're being. Look how edgy... It's like you're being edgy within the parameters of, how can we be, pro everything, what the message is.
Yeah.
This is... that Actually, what would be edgy is if they said something like
George Floyd.
Yeah, they would never do that.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. They wouldn't.
That would be edgy. They would never do that.
They would never walk that line, of course. So if we just get to how to deal with these people, shall we? First of all, I'd like to just deflect to Mary Harrington. I am once again asking American progressives to take a deep breath and tolerate another country's worldview and culture being a major news item for the next few days. Translation, shut up, please. And then I don't really often like things that are framed as the left are the real racists, but this was actually quite an interesting article posted in the Telegraph by Mutaz Ahmed. Forget wokery, the monarchy is the real bastion of anti-racism. Now, of course, the term anti-racism is a communist dog whistle, but if he's trying to reclaim it, he does actually a half-decent job in here. How bizarre our self-flagellation over the legacy of the British Empire must seem, when the last week's dreadful news broke, the parents of my Ghanaian friend shared with him a picture of the late Queen dancing with Kwame Nkrumah, one of Africa's most famous Republican revolutionaries. To them, it must have symbolised the grace with which Queen Elizabeth handled the dissolution of the empire, as opposed to the belief of some ignorant New York Times writers that she should be held responsible for colonial crimes. I would wager that this bond between minorities and the monarchy runs deeper still, for it is also a form of protection in swearing an oath to a living sovereign rather than to a land or a written constitution. We descendants of immigrants are sheltered from the inclination of some other nations to transform citizenship into a question of blood and soil. Nor do we, unlike African Americans, have the problem of justifying our allegiance to a legal document drafted by people who own themselves, who themselves own slaves. So we, as Britain, and this is why the Americans can't really comment on it very well, they're going to always infight over their sacred document, what word means what, how they can define equality, and as Carl said when he covered the Queen's passing on Thursday, you never see this outpouring for a presidential funeral. We have a very different relationship in this country. We have bonds of sentiment. And he's saying here, the idea that the British Empire is uniquely evil is ludicrous because it created this culture of almost like bringing tolerance to the rest of the world. Stopping bridal burnings in India, for example. And it's only in the safe haven of the UK that ethnicities don't enslave each other like they do in Libya at the moment. Instead, you can self-associate, you can join the queue, participate in British customs, and consider yourself an Englishman.
I think what certain sections of society that I fail to realise is how much like immigrants who come over here and want to be part of Britain really love the country and the institutions. So the day the Queen died, I went to Tesco's to my mum to get some stuff. My mum was like, go get me cake, right? So I went and got her a cake, right? And I was in Tesco's. There was two women talking. One was a woman in a hijab and one was just a white woman, and they were chatting about the death of the Queen. And the woman in the hijab said she broke down and she was crying. She was that upset. She was like in a head. She was upset. She's like, I saw her as I walked in, and everyone was like, and she was crying over the death of the Queen. Because when immigrants come over here and they want to integrate, they want to be part. They're proud to be. If they've genuinely fled asylum, right? Yeah. And I'm not talking about, they've come over from Paris where they're already safe.
Yeah, they're not floating over on a rubber duck.
Yeah, but they've come over here and they made the life. Then they're proud to be British, and they're upset. And the Americans will never get it. They'll never get it because even if you have a president, as long as he's going to be is 2 terms. There's not the same. Everyone alive basically today, except for the oldest people, the Queen's been a mainstay of their life. And even if you're against the monarchy, the fact that the Queen passed was a kind of like a moment for you to reflect on like mortality, your life, how much time's passed, your parents are going to get old. People and it came all down to that. And then that's why I said it showed the callousness of these people, because you can be against the monarchy fine, but people weren't just like upset because the Queen died. It was a reflection on themselves. She felt like, that could be my gran, that could be someone else. And then for them to come out and do like, the Queen's riving with that, it just shows that you're so off like of what people actually think. You're so out of touch, and you're so in your first thing is to be bitter and spiteful and callous and let me ruin that person's day when they're already upset, when they're already angry, when they're already feeling pain. Let me go and push the knife in for what? To make for a little, which isn't even funny. Your joke's not even funny. So They really think, and a lot of immigrants, they love the Queen. Some immigrants love the Queen more than like British people do, because they're so happy that they've been accepted in to Britain. Like they had to earn it to get here.
Yeah.
We were just born here. So
that's why this guy finished the article, funnily enough, with the monarchy in being a living embodiment of the nation and in guaranteeing liberty for everyone has also become a protector of minority rights. The basic truth utterly enrages the Republican left. Long may it continue to do so. And I mean, this guy, I don't know if he's first or second generation immigrant, but with writing like this, I'm glad you're my countryman, my friend. So if you'd like to see some better reporting than most of these leftists of the actual historical event at the time, I'm just going to link to Carl and Callum's coverage on the day. I just thought the gentleman in the office just did some eloquent stuff here. And to finish with a final, I suppose, bittersweet, wholesome little note, the royal beekeeper had to inform the Queen the bees had died. It's a really strange little tradition, apparently, but he had to go up to the hives, and he said, speaking from Buckingham Palace Gardens, Mr. Chappell, who's the beekeeper, said to the male, I'm at the hives now, and it is traditional when someone dies that you go to the hives and say a little prayer and put a black ribbon on the hive. I drape the hives with a black ribbon and bow. The person who died is the master or mistress of the hives, someone important in the family who dies, and you don't have anyone more important than the Queen, do you? So you knock on each hive and say, the mistress is dead, but don't you go, your master will be a good master to you. I've done the hives at Clarence House, and now I'm in Buckingham Palace doing the same. And so there's something to take away here is even nature itself is being somewhat bittersweetly affected by the passing of this totemic figure in world history. And so we're a quaint little country. Our sentiments and sense of national identity are what bond us together. It's what our enemies and sometimes the leftists and the propositional nations that hate their own country, let alone ours, don't quite understand. But as you said, the people that come to this country and genuinely want to be a part of it, and the people who have grown up all their lives with the Queen as some sort of ephemeral grandmother, really cared about this passing. And so, in many respects, God save the Queen. God bless. John himself says, my letter of citizenship states invitation by patent on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen. So our own fantastic editor is here because of Her Majesty. It's very sad that she's passed, and up yours to anyone who wants to make light of it, I suppose.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as Carl's speech that he gave at the Witten on the Word and the Shire. If you want to follow what else Carl's putting out, you can follow him on Getter at Carl Benjamin on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.